Hello, everybody. It's Kyla from Nutritional Revolution, and we are diving into answering all your guys' questions today. We've had a handful of questions submitted, and we are going to dive into all of those, and they're all over the board. We're going to be answering questions on a lot of hydration questions, actually. Good time of year for that. We had some questions about muscle protein synthesis, vegan fueling, reducing cellulite, R5 quick and dirty life hacks. So we'll dive into all that stuff. I'm just going to go through them in the order that we kind of got them. And we did some research as well for some of these. So you guys, if you want to read some of the studies we'll mention, we'll include those in the show notes for you guys. So the first question we got was, I think, a great question. All questions are great questions, from at kaike.yoga, I think, is how I'll say that. And they said, I heard the body breaks down protein when it gets too hot to try to cool down. Thoughts? ? So this is a very interesting topic. And I actually just heard, I think it was Professor Trent Stillingworth talking about this the other day on our International Olympic Committee webinar. And he was mentioning too that this is definitely a great area of research that they're looking into for athletes. However, there's really no research on humans. A lot of stuff on cells and a lot of research on animals. And so what he was saying in regards to the cells is they've obviously put cells in a petri dish in the lab, and they're looking at either getting them not just hot, but about how hydrated or dehydrated they are. And it seems like there's a correlation when the cells get dehydrated that, yeah, there is a connection with increased protein breakdown. Again, this is in a petri dish, not in a human body. So take this all with a grain of salt, of course, until we have more research in this area. The other research I pulled, I'll read the title of the paper. It is Chronic Heat Stress Affects Muscle Hypertrophy, Muscle Protein Synthesis, and Uptake of Amino Acid in Broilers. So this is looking at like roaster chickens, basically, via insulin-like growth factor, mammalian target of rapamycin signal pathway. So again, in animals, but what they did find is that, yes, of course, that these chickens, when they were exposed to heat stress, there was a decreased muscle protein synthesis. There's basically a result in smaller chicken breast meat. And there was a decrease in amino acid transportation, down regulating the IGF-mTOR signal pathway. So really great question. Unfortunately, not a whole lot in humans. Something to keep in mind. This is how a lot of research obviously really starts in a petri dish or in a small sample size or in an animal. And then when we start to see results from that, we can hopefully get funding to further that to get proof of how effective or not that is in humans. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes, but excellent question. Then I had a friend of mine, actually, she said, vegan fueling for sport. So her husband has recently gone vegan. And what I'll say for this is actually a vast majority of the sport fueling products really are vegan. Maybe they don't all say certified vegan, but I would say a vast majority of them, if you look at the ingredients labels, they're not coming from animal sources, unless, I know collagen is really hot right now, but unless they're trying to put like collagen or potentially some amino acids in the product, many times the products will more than likely be vegan. And so, because they're just very carbohydrate based, and we're not getting that from animal sources. The big thing across the board, whether you're vegan or not vegan, would be just making sure you're getting in enough energy, and specifically carbohydrates. And so one of the things that I see time and time again in our athletes is when we do an assessment of their current diet, or when we build them a meal plan, one of the biggest kind of like ahas for them is they were highly under consuming carbohydrates. And as we all know, carbohydrates are one of the best and most effective fuel sources for endurance athletes. So if you're under consuming these things, without a doubt, your performance is going to be sacrificed. So, and what I find is many times, not only are my athletes under in carbohydrates, but they're likely like well over in fats. And so just making that shift there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, changing your total caloric volume. It's literally just maybe decreasing fat intake and increasing carbohydrate intake. So something to, of course, we can help you discover that if you need some help in that arena, but that is something we would do. So again, vegan or non-vegan, if you're under consuming carbohydrates, you're gonna be in trouble when it comes to performance. We do see now athletes are consuming sometimes 90 to 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And for these long duration, higher intensity sustained efforts, and they're crushing it. And, however, if your gut is nowhere near used to consuming this amount, do not all of a sudden tomorrow try and take down 120 grams of carbs in your ride or your run. It's likely not going to go over well. You do need to train the gut to tolerate that volume of carbohydrates on many levels. You train the gut to increase your stomach emptying rate, your gastric emptying rate. But in doing that too with carbohydrates, you're also trying to train basically the small intestine to upregulate the amount of kind of carbohydrate or GLUT4 receptors really that are at the surface of the intestine to help now when you empty these carbohydrates quickly from the stomach, that they then also are quickly pulled into the bloodstream out of the small intestine and that they're not sitting in your stomach. So if you're not training and tapering that up or tightening that up, like you're going to have a problem and it's not going to feel great in your stomach. So just keeping that in mind. But the other cool thing is if you are hitting your carbs, you've got trained up to that point. We do see when you're at a higher level like that, there's also a decreased level of muscle breakdown. And that makes sense if you think about it, is your body's trying to perform. And if the fuel is not there from a carbohydrate, it's going to break down your muscle tissue to get energy and do the efforts that it's trying to do. So your body's going to break down all the things: body fat, muscle, glycogen in the muscle as well. So carbohydrates stored in the muscle. So just keep that in mind. If we can get enough carbohydrates on board, hopefully that means less muscle breakdown. Maybe that means better recovery. We'll see. Another question I got: how to look great in a bikini and reduce cellulite. So, I mean, you look great in a bikini by just putting a bikini on, right? So I love those memes that people say when it's like bikini season, is you can just put on your bikini anytime. You don't have to train for that. Everybody looks great in a bikini, but the reducing cellulite question is very interesting. And honestly, my background is not in the like dermatology or anything like that. So I'm not versed in this arena. However, I will say that if you are doing adequate strength training and you are consuming adequate daily amounts of protein, that you can, improve body composition, potentially decreasing body fat, increasing your lean mass, and that may improve the looks of cellulite in certain areas of the body. And then another question I got here: top 5 quick and dirty life hacks from a nutritionist. And she says, favorite quick meals, general rules, etc. My favorite quick go-to meal here that we do at our house, probably too much, is just a chicken veggie stir fry, occasionally with either rice, or we'll do these ramen noodles that are gluten-free. We found them at Whole Foods and even at Costco. But basically we'll just throw in the oven actually chicken breasts, and we'll season them however we like. Whenever we get our veggies, we will chop them up. We actually batch chop. So we will chop up a bunch of veggies, put them all in Tupperware. So then we can just kind of like dump out as much of the Tupperware as we want of the veggies to put into a stir fry. And then we'll just drop those ramen noodles into boiling water. Then we end up mixing them all together. Coconut aminos are a regular occurrence, as well as I love a good toasted sesame oil for the stir fry. That's a super easy, fast combo, especially when you have your veggies already prepped. You just dump them in there, put your noodles on the stove. Quick, easy, carbs, proteins, fats, colorful veggies, super, super easy. The other thing, just a life suggestion, top quick tip to answer this person's question, is to choose 3 different colored veggies each week when you go grocery shopping. So I think what I see many of my clients run into is either they're not eating enough veggies, or when they do their grocery shopping, they maybe just hone in on like all the green produce. Don't forget to include things that are purple and red and orange, and just making sure that you have color. And so kind of touching back to our stir fries, like we, as a quick example, we always do purple cabbage, and we always do mushrooms. We do carrots. We'll mix it up. Sometimes we'll do celery, so zucchini, like tomatoes. So we'll get a variety of different colored things in there. And that is important. Eating the rainbow is important. So do get some variety in your diet when you do your grocery shopping. Another quick tip would be just make sure you're nailing those basics too. So that's going to be, are you eating enough? Right? Like total calories, protein, carbs, and fats. Are you getting enough hydration before you start trying to dive into, should I be doing and honing in on like nutrient timing, or, looking for the best ergogenic supplement. Really make sure you're nailing those basics of nutrition first, because that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck, and then start honing in on these smaller things. Another tip is get a second freezer. If you don't already have one, these are so handy, especially with the way they make refrigerators these days. I feel like we got a new refrigerator when we moved this year, and the thing is so small inside. It looks huge, but you open it and there's like no space in there. So get a second freezer. Keep your frozen fruits in there. If you have frozen veggies, you can keep your meats in there. And just one of the things we do to keep life easy in the meal prep cruising is like, we'll just pull out one thing of a protein portion, and we'll just pop it in a pot of water, cold water, just to like let it thaw throughout the day. And then it's thawed and ready to be cooked that day for dinner. And then you can just switch up which source you choose. So if you have, I don't know, frozen salmon one day, and then the next day you have chicken breast, and then the next day you have pork tenderloin or steak or whatever, just mixing up those protein sources is a good way to just keep life easy, but it's all there and you can just grab it and go. And then tip 5, final tip, throw some beans in your smoothie. I know people always give me a funny look when I say that, but it's a great way to increase fiber in your smoothie, and you can just grab some canned beans. I usually like a white bean, like a cannellini or a white navy bean, and just rinse the beans after you dump them out of the can, and then, put a 1/3 cup of them or so in your smoothie, and you don't taste it. And it's just a great way to get in some more fiber. All right. We had another question here that said, how much water should we be starting our mornings with? So another great question. There are water recommendations that are kind of all over the place. But a very kind of like simple, rough rule of thumb is to consume over the span of a day 1/2 to 1 ounce per pound of body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, that would mean consuming between 75 to 150 ounces throughout the day. So if you were to break that and say maybe you're, trying to get through a little bit of that 5 times a day. So, sipping a little bit at a main meal or 3 main meals and then 2 snacks, then we're talking about getting in like 15 ounces per meal up to 30 ounces per meal. So kind of thinking about that when you first wake up, maybe you aim for 1/5 or 20% of whatever your end of day calculation is. If you are peeing all the time, maybe taper it back or add a little bit of electrolytes there. If you're training and sweating, I would maybe aim for the higher end. If you're out and living, if it's summer where you are and you're training outside and losing a little bit more fluids, just keep that in mind. Or if you're at altitude and you're not used to being at altitude, aim for the higher end as well. All right. We had a great question from @Danica Metcalf. I think I said that okay. She said, hi, I just listened to episode 22 on supplements and found this one found this to be one of the most informative episodes for me. I have a question on creatine dosage. Most products have a 1.5 gram to 2.5 gram per serving. For a loading dose, is it correct that I would be taking 8 to 13 servings per day for 7 days? And that is correct. So if you guys listened to that podcast, episode 22, we mentioned for creatine loading, you want to actually aim for 20 grams per day, split into 4 doses. So 5 grams spread out 4 times throughout the day for 7 days to saturate those creatine stores within the muscle. However, if you are on maintenance, you can just do 5 grams per day. And that's it. And even after you load, you can stick with 5 grams per day consistently. And that's what much of the literature suggests. So the fact that companies come out with these products that have creatine in them, but the serving size is only 1.5 grams or 2.5 grams, but the literature suggests 5 grams, it might just be a way that they're trying to show that they have more servings, or maybe there's all kinds of other stuff in that product. So it might have beta alanine and sodium and who knows what, and then there's 1.5 grams of creatine. And if you're using the product solely for the creatine, then you would have to increase that dose quite significantly, especially if you're loading with it. So do double check those labels, make sure you're getting the dose that you need, and check out episode 22 if you guys missed it. Okay, then we had another question that said, I'm noticing salt on my skin during a hot run. Did I consume too much salt, or do I need to eat more salt? This is a great question. If you don't normally notice salt on your skin, that's something that we'll dive into in that situation. So, for example, say you normally train, don't really notice salt on your skin, but you go up to altitude. Maybe you're 3,000, even 5,000, 6,000 feet higher than what you're used to training at. And you are training and you see more salt on your skin than you normally do, or on your jersey or things like that. That is likely a result that the environment is actually drier, the air is drier than your training environment where you didn't notice salt on your kit. So this is just one situation. I will give others. So this is a situation I've seen a lot of athletes run into, and they will go up to altitude, they'll train, the air is really dry. And so what happens is the air is really effective at pulling the moisture out of your sweat and leaving behind those salt crystals. So it might look like, one, you're sweating more, and it may look like you're losing more salt than you've ever lost before. And in fact, you're likely not losing more sweat, or you're not losing more salt, I should say, than you normally would. However, if you're at altitude, you can be more prone to losing fluid faster across the board, even when you're sleeping. So do keep that in mind. So that's one situation. So in that example, that person might need more total fluids, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they need also more sodium. So just kind of keep that in mind. The one thing I'll also say about this is that I do highly, highly, highly suggest doing sweat testing for yourself, because what I think we're seeing here is that sweat losses, fluid losses, and then sodium losses within the sweat are so inter-individual that there's no one size fits all. There's not a suggestion where women should consume this much and men should consume that much. That does not apply, because we can have, 115-pound woman that's sweating and losing just as much as a, pro athlete male that's 175. And, so it is very individual. And so I do highly suggest you test, because if you know that information, it's really going to be in your favor when it comes to performance. And there's things where you can test your sweat sodium concentration. However, those methods do not tell you your fluid losses. So that's another piece of the puzzle you should test. But to test your sweat sodium losses, there's Levelin. You can send in your tests, and that's a pretty scientific approach. There's precision hydration, where you have to go in person and wear a patch on your arm. And then there is open to the public now, like these Gatorade sweat patches, and you can get those online and at Dick's Sporting Goods and stuff. Not affiliated with any of these, by the way, but these are different options that are out there. If you have a friend that works in a college lab and is doing this stuff, go for that method for sure. Definitely more accurate. But getting that data is a good starting point, and then doing the simple weigh yourself before and immediately after your training session will start to give you a picture of total fluid losses, and then you can equate that to your sweat sodium result. So if you're losing, say, I'll just use like super easy numbers, but if you're losing 1 milligram of sodium, which is typically not the case, but 1 milligram of sodium per ounce of sweat, that is very low. And you lose 16 ounces, well, then you would lose 16 milligrams of sodium. That is very low. Usually, I've never seen that before, but just for easy number purposes, that's an example. So you'd be able to kind of do some math there. That is something we do with our clients. We will take their data and we will build them plans and determine fluid losses and that kind of stuff based off of different environmental conditions. All right, next question is from at Miss Jen Barr. She said, is collagen a fad? Is it actually as amazing as they insist it is? Yeah, this is a really good one. Collagen is just blowing up left and right. I don't know if that's because of Jennifer Aniston or not, but whatever the reasoning, it is blowing up left and right. From a sports perspective, there's some research there. In terms of muscle protein synthesis, no, I would not use collagen as your post-training recovery to help with muscle reparation. Reason being is there is very little of the amino acid leucine in there, and that's really the primary amino acid we need to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So you would likely have to consume a lot of collagen to get that effect. So not for post-training. However, there is evidence of consuming somewhere between 5 to 15 grams of collagen per day, ideally in the 30 to 60 minutes pre-training. And that can improve a couple things. And I pulled a study here, and I'll read the title to you guys in case, again, you want to check it out. And it is, here we go. Oh, sorry. All right. The effects of collagen peptide supplementation on body composition, collagen synthesis, and recovery from joint injury and exercise. And this is a systematic review by Kotri et al. This came out in 2021, September. So just 6 months ago. And so they gathered together a bunch of different studies, looked at them. And the one I want to hone in on was them looking at the studies assessing collagen supplementation and its effect on collagen synthesis. And so they looked at a couple different studies, of course, and I'll kind of break a couple of those down for you. So they looked at one study, they called it recreationally active men. They're consuming 5 or 15 grams of collagen per day that was vitamin C enriched. And they did see an increase in collagen synthesis with the 15-gram collagen dose versus the 5-gram dose. So 15 grams seems to be a sweeter spot than 5. So just kind of keep that in mind. There was another study here they looked at, and they looked at a little bit of muscle protein synthesis. Let's see, where was it? Here we go. They looked at muscle soreness as well, which is very interesting. So the takeaway here was that the changes in body composition and strength with 15 grams of collagen per day was not effective. Definitely not in young, they said, recreational participants. However, if you are an elderly sarcopenic male, there might be something to help there in terms of body composition. But when we're looking at joint pain and collagen synthesis, there seems to be some benefits there with supplementing with collagen, again, in that 60 minutes prior to exercise. So that would be, if you're using it at all, that would be the place to use it. But yeah, in terms of I don't know, Jennifer Aniston, hair growth and skin and nail. I'm not sure on the research there. Maybe someone else will do something on that. But in terms of sport, pre-training with some vitamin C, 15 grams is the sweet spot. Let's see. The next question we had here was from @SimeyH. Do preload hydration supplements work? If you are doing a big event in the heat, and I see this plenty of times. I mean, we've had tons of athletes we've worked with where we start doing sweat testing with them and we find out that they're losing, 80 to 120 ounces an hour. And if you think about that, there's no way that athlete is going to drink 120 ounces per hour to minimize those losses. Your gut just cannot tolerate it. So, and say they're going to be out racing for 6 to 10 hours. That's so much fluid loss. So of course it's going to taper down because they're not going to have that fluid in them because they can't bring that much in, but just kind of keeping that in mind, what that's going to look like. And so if you know that you're someone like that, or maybe you're not trained for the heat and you are going to be racing in the heat, preloading with some fluids can absolutely be in your favor. Many times you're going to want to look for a product that has like 1,000 or more milligrams of sodium. And that is a good kind of place to be to help with the preload. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to basically get something that's really high in salt that will then help pull water into your system. And so then you're starting your race holding more water, which gives your body more water to pull from to cool itself essentially. So they do work. We do see benefits in performance when athletes are preloaded for big events like this in the heat. So yeah, they absolutely can work. The other thing I will add to this question and kind of give some tips here is that one of the things we see people run into trouble with is they are approaching a race. They're starting to kind of, think about keeping hydration up, drinking all their fluids, and they maybe drink, just an example, maybe they drink 150 ounces, a couple days out, but then the day before the race, they only drink 50 ounces. What can happen to your body actually is because 2 days before the race, you drank 150 ounces. And then 1 day before the race, you only drank 50 ounces. Your body on that 1 day out is going to be peeing at a rate, assuming you're going to drink another 150 ounces. This is actually a wrestling weight cutting tactic. So you will actually pee out more than you're consuming that 1 day out. And you actually might put yourself in a place that you are more dehydrated than you were the day before. So when you're determining your total daily fluid intake, try and keep it as consistent as possible in those 2 to 3 days before the event. So you don't run into that situation and end up kind of like over peeing essentially, because you really hit the fluid the day before. Let's see. Another question we get, a lot of hydration questions, at Michelle_Clarion. Is it okay to drink by thirst? I rarely get thirsty. So for me, it's very little hydration. Again, this would be a really great place to sweat test and see, and how much fluid are you actually losing? Is there any decline in your performance? If you're tracking heart rate, what are your heart rate metrics looking like? So many times when we start to become dehydrated, efforts will feel harder, heart rate will be higher than it normally is for that same pace or effort. So if that is happening, then definitely going kind of past that or overriding that not drink to thirst, kind of you're not thirsty, and overriding that and giving yourself some fluids will definitely support your performance in that situation. But I would look at some of those markers. So, and again, if you sweat test and you decide to drink to thirst during maybe a 60-minute run, and say you came out of that session and you drank, 10 ounces, and then you sweat tested. So you weighed yourself before and after, and then you find out you lost 50 ounces. Well, maybe if you plan to run longer than 60 minutes, it would be in your favor from a performance perspective to bring on a little bit more fluid. So again, I'll harp on it all the time, but sweat testing, you really should do it. I just can't stress it enough. It's free to do. Just hop on your scale and hop on, like do your training session, hop back on, and you'll start to figure out, what those losses are looking like in these different conditions. And it's really helpful data. So we always have many of our clients do that. So it's just, it's really useful. So I can't stress it enough. Let's see. I had another question. It's kind of a big question. I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode on this one, but he said, at SebPernet said, how much and what should I eat during an Ironman? And so, I will say from a how much perspective, if your gut is trained and it's a full Ironman, you should really be pushing somewhere between 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour, if not slightly above that, if your gut's trained for it. What should you eat if it is in the heat? If you're pushing a really high intensity, this isn't your first rodeo, you want to choose carbohydrate sources that are very easy to digest, things that you've used before, that you've gut trained with. Ideally, there's nothing new. Don't do anything new on race day. So I'm not going to break it all down because I would want to know more about the client and all that stuff. But that's kind of a quick and dirty answer, I guess, to that question is quick, easy sources of carbs that you don't mind. Full Ironman distance, many times we see athletes run into flavor fatigue. So having different options or different flavors of products. If you're just getting sick and tired of like the sweetness stuff, have some more savory options. That might be pretzels for some people, might be salted potatoes if you want to go real food route. If you want to go more like sports product, there's products out there that actually are unflavored. So it's very, mild, minor. And then you have like things like goo that have every flavor under the sun, like birthday cake and chocolate espresso, like you name it, you could have different options there. So keep some alternate options. And then usually I say always have a backup. I've seen it time and time again where an athlete loses a bike bottle out of their cage or drops their, one of their fueling products. And so if you can have a backup, so you don't run into that situation where you're bonking or getting dehydrated, that would be ideal. And then let's see, we have two more questions here. We have one from @Cassie_MN said, sometimes my fingers swell during and after a run. Is this due to electrolyte imbalance or ? So this is a great question. I've seen this time and time again. This has happened to me before. And when you are training, many times your blood vessels they're dilating, they're opening up. And one of the areas they can open up is in your hands, definitely more so when it is warmer. So you'll definitely be more prone to swelling likely in a warmer situation as opposed to a cooler, because those blood vessels in your hand are opening, one, because of exercise, two, because of the heat, and because the blood vessels are very close to the surface of your skin. It's a great way for your body to basically dump heat off your body. So it can move the blood to the hands. You lose sweat off your hands and it can help cool the body basically. However, also the running and the swinging of the arms can also contribute to basically blood kind of trying to pooling in the hands and not being able to like get back to the heart and kind of move through. So that can be part of it. It can also be due to over salting. And so the fluids can move into that extracellular compartment. Some people might also notice it in like their ankles or their feet. They feel that like fluid bloat. And so what you should do in this situation is actually taper back on the maybe sodium containing products that you're consuming, and then switch to plain water for a little bit and let your body kind of pee this off. Basically, if this is happening and you haven't peed in a while, that is also that can maybe put that puzzle piece together. So taper off the salts, get back on some plain water, kind of let the system normalize itself. Hopefully that helps, Cassie. And then final question for today, or Ask Me Anything, Mrs_Rab says, does it help to put salt in your water if you're feeling really parched? Yeah, go for it. I think it's great. Like in the mornings when I wake up, I will get my big mason jar of water, and I will actually twist my salt shaker a couple times into that to help get the fluids just pulled into the body. Because if you're drinking just plain water, that's just kind of piling up in your kidneys, and your kidneys are going to pee it out. So you do want some salt in there to actually pull the fluid into the body and hydrate those cells. So excellent question there, you guys. I will include in the show notes the references from today that I mentioned, as well as if I mentioned any links or products, we can link those in the show notes as well for you guys. So hope this helps. We will do this again. You guys ask excellent questions. So we will post an AMA. We posted it on our Instagram, but if you have any questions you guys want answered that are listening, feel free to send them to us on our website. We have a contact page there. You can submit a question. You can always, again, message them to us on our social media platforms, and we will be happy to answer them. Or I think you can put them in the comments section too if you're watching this on YouTube. So enjoy, and we will see you next time.